Today we have a real treat. We get to see one of my favorite poker players, Rampage Poker, running another insane bluff at 100-200 at Hustler Casino Live, this time against another one of my favorite players, Garrett Adelstein. Make sure you check out Hustler Casino Live. They've been putting on a lot of amazing games. Also check out Rampage Poker. He blogs a lot of these pretty insane games, and he is a great follow on YouTube. In this video for PokerNews.com, let's see if he can get away with the insane bluff, or if we'll get stacked again.
When Garrett had a set of deuces. Israeli Ron straddles to 500. Rampage raising it up to 1,300. Garrett, 3 bets, not surprising. Five-four suited, one of my favorite hands. And apparently Rampage likes it too.
Rampage opens it up on the button, playing 100, 200, 500. He has the 5-4 of hearts, perfectly fine and standard, playing very, very deep stacked. And then Garrett Adelstein in the big blind opts to 3-bet. And when you are not the big blind, essentially when you're not closing the action, so for playing a small blind, big blind game when you're in the small blind, or for playing a 3 big blind game when you're in the small blind or the big blind and not the biggest blind or the straddle, you should mostly 3-bet or fold with your entire range because you don't really want to play 3 ways out of position against everyone. So this is a spot where Garrett should be 3-betting the vast majority of his range, and he does 3-bet the 10-9 suited, 10-9 of spades, which is perfectly fine. Back to Rampage with 5-4 of hearts. Some people are just saying, fold, 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 you have the 5 high. But no. When you're playing very deep stack, we're playing $126,000 deep. When you have a hand that can very reasonably flop some very strong hands that's also really unlikely to be dominated, like 5-4 of hearts or 8-7 of hearts, you should call and see the flop every time and hope to flop something.
Pot is now $11,250. These guys are deep. Garrett with a pair of 10s, open-ended. Rampage with nothing, but that hasn't stopped him before. Yeah, Rampage bets 6,500, I believe. That's a big bet. It is a wet board, though. Garrett just calls. He's got showdown value with a pair of 10s. He's open-ended.
The flop comes Jack of diamonds, 10 of hearts, 8 of diamonds, and Garrett elects to check with his middle pair and open-ended straight draw. I think that is a perfectly fine strategy. This is a spot where this board should connect okay with Rampage's range, so you definitely should not continuation bet 100% of the time, and middle pair that can easily call any turn bet is a great hand to check and call. Over to Rampage. Should we bluff the 5-4 of hearts? The tough thing about this is that if Garrett plays well, as I know he does, he's a world-class player, he's gonna have a lot of hands that are going to check call the flop, including some traps. And if he thinks you're capable of bluffing, as I'm sure he knows Rampage is, he's gonna be even more inclined to do that. So should we bluff this 5-4 of hearts on this Jack 10-8 board, given all we have is a backdoor flush draw? And I think the answer is no. I think this hand would probably rather check behind the flop and then go for a turn plus river bet if Garrett continues checking. But I think in this spot on the flop, when you bet, you want to have a hand that can reasonably continue against a check raise, like maybe any hand containing a 9 that doesn't have a pair, or a flush draw. You could get away with betting some really junky draws, but I think I'd rather those have like an overcard to the jack that you can at least turn something pretty good. So I think I'd rather just check this 5-4 back, planning on losing most of the time. But, you know, Rampage is going to try to Rampage Garrett, and he goes for the bet, which I think is fine. And then back to Garrett. Easy call. Check call, check call, check call. Try to not fold, assuming the board doesn't run out too bad.
Pot is 24,000. Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Garrett with the straight. Rampage with the flush draw now. Pot is already $24,000. Talked about it earlier. Rampage certainly has heart. He needs one more, though.
Rampage gets the dream turn, giving him the flush draw and the gut shot, but he's actually in pretty bad shape. This is a scenario where once Garrett checks though, Rampage should definitely go for a bet because Rampage's range is going to have a whole lot of middle suited connected cards, and a lot of those are going to contain a straight. And this is a spot where Garrett's 3-betting range will contain some 9s, but probably not a ton. So I definitely like a bet from Rampage. And then Garrett gets a little bit tricky. But in reality, if you think about the way the ranges look, Rampage has a whole lot of 9s, Garrett doesn't, although this time he actually does. And especially if you think your opponent is capable of running big bluffs, as we all know Rampage is, I love checking and calling because you know you're checking and calling on basically every river. So this is an excellent spot that Garrett opts to use as a check call that I think a lot of people just check raise immediately because they're worried about getting outdrawn. And to be fair, Rampage is going to have a decent amount of draws here. He could easily have a heart draw, he could have a diamond draw, he could have a set or 2 pair. So Rampage is going to be very live in this spot, but he doesn't have all that many outs in general, right? Sometimes he can get there, sometimes he's not, but more often than not, he's going to be on the river with a hand that may feel very, very, very inclined to bluff. So I love the check call by Garrett. Let's see how it goes on the river.
$16,000 bet. There's a call from Garrett. Pot is now $56,000. Here's the river. Garrett's good. He checks. Rampage has 5 high. He can't beat the board.
Will Rampage bluff? What do you think? He has the 5 high.
$45.
How much?
45.
45,000 from Rampage.
Rampage goes for a $45,000 bet on the river when the board pairs the 10. And this is an interesting spot because I think Rampage wants to have 2 very distinct bet sizes in this spot on the river. He probably wants to have a roughly pot size bet used for value with full houses. And he also wants to have something like a half pot bet used for value with mostly straights, plus a few full houses mixed in there. So what cards does he want to have when he uses roughly the pot size bet? And I think he wants to block full houses. So how do you go about blocking full houses here? I think you want to have either a jack, a 10, an 8, or a 7 in your hand. But in reality, he's probably not going to be betting the turn with all that many jacks or 10s. So he really is going to have some like 8s and 7s in this spot. So what do those hands look like? I think that's going to be stuff like ace 7 suited that decides to go for an optimistic flop bet. Maybe if he did decide to bet the flop with something like 8-6 suited, maybe that's a hand you could go for this bet size with on the river. And I think whenever you go for the small bet, you probably want to mostly have unpaired hands that because you can't really block a straight, right? So I think in this spot, if I had to slot 5-4 of hearts into either a small, like a half pot bet size or a pot size bet size, I think I'd put it in the half pot bet size and use mostly pair blockers to block the full house in the big bet size. But whatever, when you get to the river here with the 5 high, you do want to go for a bluff, especially when you don't block the logical flush draws for your opponent, because Garrett's obviously not going to have a whole lot of hands containing a 5 or a 4 of hearts, even though he could have, of course, ace 5, ace 4, so he block a few. And that puts Garrett in a pretty tough spot because he has a straight, but the board's paired.
You're good.
He makes the call.
Nice hand.
I thought some of you thought it would be a tough spot for Garrett, but he calls pretty much immediately. And you have to ask, why in the world would he call pretty much immediately, given he could lose to a full house? Well, first things first, he knows Rampage enjoys a good bluff. And he also blocks the full houses really hard with his 10. Whenever you have a 10 in your hand, it makes it way less likely Rampage has a full house because he's less likely to have Jack 10 or 10-8 or 10-7 suited somehow. So I love the call from Garrett. And, you know, sometimes your opponent is going to beat you in this spot with a full house or maybe even a slightly better straight with the Queen 9. But more often than not, you're going to scoop a really, really big pot. I like the bluff by Rampage. I like the call by Garrett. Both these players played it well, but Garrett ends up with all the money. That's gonna be it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a quick favor, click the like and subscribe buttons below. Also click the notification bell. I appreciate all of you being here. Good luck, and I hope all of your bluffs get through.